I completely stay away from doing anything like giving out any number during a call because number one, I don't want to make the conversation about money. I want to make it about experience and value. Someone who leaves the call saying, I just want to work with you. It doesn't matter how much it costs. Like, I just want to work with you. That is the goal of the discovery call for me. And that's why money is always just sidelined. And also, it allows me to get a really good picture of the commitment, of the scope before I give out any kind of number. And I always like to think about it. This is your host, Dyutama, but you can call me DJ. And I love to inspire food photographers to dream. I spent 15 years as an architect studying buildings and constructing hospitals before taking the biggest leap of faith of my life, which was setting up a food styling and food photography business right from scratch. If you're a dreamer like me, wanting to start a new photography business or grow your existing food photography business, jump right into a world where I share practical, actionable strategies to improve your photography skills, to work with clients, make more money, all with a fearless mindset. This is the My Food Lens podcast, and we take you one step closer to your dreams. So let's go. So today I want to talk to you about 3 top questions that you need to ask a client when you get on a discovery call. These are questions that I have collected, gathered, stumbled upon, made mistakes about in my professional career. And I have ultimately added them into my professional process when I work with any client, whether it's a repeat client or a new client. This has become a part of my process and it's helped me a great deal in one, looking professional and bringing clarity and just really getting efficient and understanding whether I'm fit for a job or not. And I have condensed all of that and I'm bringing it to you today so that you can bring this or add this to your own process as well. Whether you are a beginner in the industry, whether you're an intermediate or a professional, this doesn't change at all. At whatever level you are, if you're not doing this, boss, if you start doing it, it's a game changer. You're going to look so pro. Okay. And these are things that I have learned by working with big hotel brands, global magazines, small boutique brands. So no matter who your client is, this is still valid. You can use this in your process for whichever client you're working with. So let's get started. So basically what happens is, when we get a new inquiry from a client, first of all, that's a win in itself, right? So we're like, yay, got it, So we're very excited. And sometimes we get so caught up in that excitement, or we are in such a frame of mind where we are celebrating, or maybe we feel a bit pressured or humbled, like whatever we are feeling. Sometimes we forget to ask some really important questions. Sometimes actually we don't even know that these are important questions that we need to ask up front. We don't even know that this should be part of our process and we don't include it in our process. And sometimes what happens, I feel, is that, the client is so huge. It's a big name. It's prestigious. And that's why we are very hesitant to ask questions so that, maybe we don't want to not look cool, right? We want to look cool. So we feel like, should we ask this? Or, am I supposed to just know? And they feel like I should understand this. So there are a lot of reasons why we don't put out these questions up front. But I cannot emphasize this enough that even before we share our rate card, even before we send out a quotation, we share our fee, even before we say yes to anything at all, just to open up the conversation, we have to know some of the key parts of the project so that we have a full understanding of what we are handling, what's on the table, and what is it that we might be committing to. That's huge, right? So even if we have worked with a client before, even if it's a repeat customer, we have to repeat the questions as well, boss. Now, maybe the fee may not change, but the scope might change and the deliverables might change. And that's why those questions are still valid. So to avoid any sort of communication, so that every part of the project is like crystal clear, And so that you're not making any assumptions and you're not making any mistakes and not having any regrets later, it is super duper important to ask a set of questions upfront before anything else. And I feel like most of you might be like me as well. So I like over communication more than less communication. So for me, over communication, asking more, talking more is better than less a misunderstanding, right? And also that's why that means that more questions are better than less questions. And I feel like a lot of you are like that as well. What happens is that when we ask the right questions before offering our rates or before creating a quotation or before saying yes to a repeat client or a new client, what happens is that it actually allows us to understand the scope completely before diving in. The second thing that happens is that we can gauge whether we are right for the job or whether the job is right for us. It fits our skills, it fits our vision, our purpose of being a photographer. So we can gauge whether the job is the right fit or not. The third thing that can happen is that the expectations of the clients, we get to know them so well and we can judge whether we can meet them or not. That is so important, right? And the last thing I feel like, when we ask the right questions upfront, it actually gives us a very good idea of what commitment is needed from our side. What will it take for us to deliver that project, to complete the project? Is it even possible or not? So it gives us a really good snapshot of everything. That's why these questions are so important. Now, getting to that level of understanding, having that solid grip, it really makes us secure in taking the conversation to the next level. If I have to really think of something, I would say it's like a dating app. I don't know. I think maybe it's a bad example because I've never really used a dating app and it's probably too late for me to use one. The husband would probably not be happy if I got on Tinder. But if I have to give a fun example, a bad example, a fun example, all right. So it would probably be like a dating app. Before you meet anyone on your first date, what do? You would first go and you would read a little bit about them. You would find out a little bit about them. You would see if there is even like a fraction of a fit or not before you take the decision to even meet them for the first time, right? You are doing just a little bit more homework before you even say, hi, I saw you on Tinder. Before you even get to that stage, you are doing that 10-minute or that 15-minute of your homework before taking the first step of saying hi. So similarly, in a very similar but a totally different way, when we receive an inquiry from a client, we have to refrain from blindly sending them our rate card. It's like opening up the app, seeing someone, like maybe not even seeing someone and just sending them a hi. It could be anybody. It could be so wrong, right? You got that? Okay. So that's exactly what this is. That when you receive an inquiry and people, obviously the clients, obviously they always want to know your rates first. Like that's one of the first questions. Can you share your fee? Do not just go upfront and send your fee. Refrain from blindly sending them your rate card. Instead, request them for a pre-discussion or a discovery call. Now, what is a discovery call? What is a discovery call? I'm sure you have heard this word before, and maybe you have it in your process as well. But when we cover the questions, maybe you would like to have a good look that, am I asking these questions or not? So let's just first very quickly talk what is a pre-discussion or discovery call. So basically, when you get an inquiry from a client, don't send them your fee upfront. Request them for a pre-discussion. It is usually a really short call. It's about 20 to 30 minutes. It's completely free of charge. Remember that. It's completely free of charge. It could be audio or video. I like to do video because then it's just like you're talking to them, you're meeting them, and they could be sitting anywhere in the world. So that's pretty cool, right? And what this call does is basically two things. One, it allows you to speak to the client face to face, ask your questions, and it gives you a really good sense of the brand and the vision of their project before you commit anything, right? That's so huge. And the second thing it does, which is also very huge for you, is that it allows the client to get to know you a little bit more, and it gives them the confidence that they will be in good hands. Like when you send out a quote, just the quote, that's the only point of discussion. Price point will become the decision maker. But when you have a conversation with them, when they see you face to face, they like you. They feel like, ooh, who is this person? I want to work with them. Like, wouldn't you feel if you were in their place, right? So it works both ways. When you have a short video call and you can talk to them, it's a huge deciding factor. Price point takes a second priority, and the experience and you become the first priority in decision making. That's why the discovery call is so important. Now, there are tons of different questions that you can ask the client, right, to get a sense of the project. And every photographer has a different system and a different set of questions. Like I said, these set of questions are really things that I have tailored over my so many years of experience working in the commercial world. And that's how I finally come up with these top questions. And I feel like they really work for me. And I don't need to spend more time talking to a client to get more information. They hit the nail on the head and they get the job done in the shortest possible time because everybody's strapped for time. So everyone has a different set of questions. These are mine. And if they are not part of yours, maybe you can try including them. So when we start speaking to a potential client, we actually need to layer our conversation, right? It's just like when we meet new people, when we meet friends, we don't just jump on from one topic to the other. We don't just jump into, hey, are you single? No, we don't. We first ask them who they are, where they work, just how was your day? You kind of ease into things. And it's exactly like that, even when we speak to a client. So we need to layer our conversation. The way we layer is that we ask the most basic, but also the most important questions upfront. Again, like I said, everybody's strapped for time. You've got to respect that. And your time is precious too. So you've got to get the most important details out quickly. All right. And then once you get that information, then you can have a conversation about the other details depending on how things are going and how much time you have. So things like branding, marketing, campaign, audience, props, backdrops. These are second layer conversations, boss. Do not start there. I'll tell you where you can start. Okay. When I talk to my clients, I like to talk about the big picture in my discovery call. So one of the first questions I like to begin with is, how many photos and what style of photos are you looking for? This question is extremely important, and I kind of like to open up the conversation with this. Now, this question has two parts, but they are very closely connected. They are interconnected. So when we ask how many photos and what style of photos are you looking for, let's say the client says, we are looking for 20 photos. Now, immediately you're like, ooh, okay, 20 photos. So do they mean 20 photos in a bowl, like food in a bowl, or no props, or 20 large compositions with hands in a frame? So you're thinking, all right, now every style requires different time, different effort. So just by asking how many photos and what style, you can immediately gauge whether this job requires 1 day, 4 hours, 2 days, more, less. You can also lead your conversation from here because this becomes the basis for other questions. So the moment they tell you the number of photos, you immediately layer your conversation with, oh, so what style of photos? Simple compositions versus complex compositions? Big difference, boss. So the moment they share the style, what they are looking for, immediately you can judge whether they need a food stylist or, maybe they have one. Or if you need to style the food, what does that mean? That means additional time for you to style and photograph, which means fewer photos for them if you're both the stylist and the photographer, and additional service for you. So this way you can start thinking about the fees. You can start thinking about the extent of the styling. You can start thinking, are there any additional services and any other parameters that will play into you executing the project? Now, let's say the client does not know what style of photos they want. You can show them some of your past work and you can show them examples of what you mean by Oh, here's a product photo. It's just the food, no props. Oh, here's a lifestyle photo. In this, we have a composition which is so elaborate. Then you can go one level up and you can say, oh, this was a documentary style, or this was a table setting and it took us 4 hours to create this. You can start pulling up your photos and showing them so that they can be, very specific. Yeah, I need 10 photos of this kind and I need 10 photos of this kind. So immediately the conversation about the number of photos, the style of photos is giving you so much clarity, and it's giving them also so much clarity. But let's say that you don't have any photos in your collection and the client says, oh, I don't know what style. You can literally just go on the internet, or you can ask them to go on the internet and say, can you pull up one photo? Just any one photo that you have in your mind, you might have seen, and you think that that's what you want for your own food products. Can you just show me that? Or can you send that to me later? That's all. So the moment you understand the style, you know the number, you can see if they fit, if they match or not. Maybe they want 20 photos of large compositions and they are only looking for a 1 day food photography session. That's unrealistic. That is not possible, boss. Okay. So I always like to start with number and style because it gives me clarity, but it also gives the client a chance to get clarity on what they are asking from the photographer. Now, once you know approximately how many photos, what is the extent of styling, your mind is already mentally calculating how this project can be quoted. You might be speaking, but your mind is working in the background. And again, before you offer any input, before you go like, oh yeah, I think it's like, no, hold it. Don't get excited. Okay. You need to ask more questions. Don't just jump to conclusions and offer input at this point. You have 2 more questions to go, boss. So hold on. In the discovery call, your job is to listen and absorb and talk less about yourself. Okay. You need to listen more and really get a full grip before you can start giving input. So the next question I ask, once I know what is the number, what is the style, the next most important question that I ask is, which is often quite missed out. I have to point this out that this question is often missed out. It's one of the last questions someone might ask, but for me, it's really one of the forefront runners. So the second question that I ask is, where will you be using the photos? Or what is the usage of the photos? This question is prime because this question allows you to gauge what is the value of the photo to the client. I'm coming to this from a very license, ownership, copyright kind of a angle, but it has such a huge part to play in your fee, in your quotation. You cannot offer a quotation before understanding what is the purpose or where the photos are going to be used. So when you ask the question, what is the usage of these photos, or where will you be using the photos? The client might say, oh yeah, it's for social media, it's for our website, it's for ads. Well, then it sounds like, you would think that, okay, it's for digital use, it's for, their online use. Fine. So that means a certain cost. Whatever your cost is, you can allocate that, okay, in your mind. But let's say the client says, oh, this photo is for a magazine. Or, we're going to use this in TV commercials. We're going to use these stills or these videos. Or they could say that, oh yeah, my friend is coming up with a cookbook and this is going to be as an ad in her book. Or it could be these photos are for packaging. We are coming up with a new product, or we are coming up with a product and we are taking these photos for packaging. Whoa. That's it. Get all your antennas up. Your flags are waving high because, boss, any of these, that's a totally different ball game. It's a completely different scenario than social media website ads. Okay. This is a whole different kind of license. It's a whole different usage and it's a whole different price point. Again, as they are giving you this info, your mind is just running in the background to see where you come into this project, what you can offer, where it is fitting in terms of the skills, and what it would be in terms of your fee. So if they are looking at cookbook, if they are looking at billboards, TV commercials, You are thinking about the style of photography, the resolution of your photos. You're thinking of the kind of editing. You're thinking of so many things as they are giving you just the small bit of information of where they are going to use these photos. And the biggest picture that you're getting out of this is the fee, really. Again, you just have to keep listening. Do not, my friend, blurt out your fee at this point or your opinions about it unless you are asked. Doesn't mean that if the client is asking a question, you don't answer. But what it means is that don't start giving your input at this point. Gather all the information before you give out any sort of feedback or input or your take on the project. So just listen, have a full understanding before you offer anything, because that's what a discovery call is all about. So by this time, with these two questions alone, number of photos, style of photos, additional services, license, editorial, commercial, you have got such a solid idea of the project already. And you have only asked two questions. And it's probably just been 12 minutes. You have 8 more minutes to go talking to the client. So from here, you've built such a good, like your mind is running and you've built such a good analysis of the project for yourself. And with all of that buzz going on while you listen to the client, it's time to ask the big question. So the third question that I like to ask is, do you have a budget in mind? Ta-da! I know. This question is like, anyway, I never like to lead with this question. I mean, if you start a conversation with money, it will always stay about money. The conversation will never come down to, skill, value, vision, experience. The client will literally get stuck on the fee part. And from there on, it'll be so tough for them to move on if the number is not fitting within what they had in mind. So it's best to keep this as the last topic, as the last thing that you really bring up. Because by this time, within 15 minutes of talking to someone, they've probably started getting to know you a little bit. They have a little sense of what you look like. They've put a face to you and your work. And, they're feeling really comfortable. They're feeling confident in your knowledge, in your approach. You don't want to spoil that. You don't want to make it all about the money. Okay, so that's why I always keep this as the last question in my repertoire in my 20-minute call. Now, what we do need to understand is that the success of this question is kind of subjective. So please don't hold me to it, because some clients, they come to the discussion and they have very clear budgets and some don't. They just don't know what it would cost them to hire a professional photographer. And that's okay. Let's say they don't have a budget in mind. That's okay. You don't have to give them a number upfront. Now, that is something that you absolutely have to remember, that please don't feel the pressure, to blurt out your regular standard fee. It's then the same of just sending them a rate card. So don't. If they don't have a number, you have no obligation. There is no pressure for you to just go out and give your standard fee. Maybe this project is different. Maybe the fee that you're going to quote is actually too low. Even if they don't have a budget in mind, doesn't mean that the number you will put out is too high. It just means that they don't know exactly what it might cost them. So you can easily just say to them that, please give me some time and I'll put a tailored quote together and send it across. You really don't have to feel the pressure to put out a number in that very call while you are talking to them, because then you are going to get held by it and you will not be allowed to move too much around it. So you definitely need to give it a little bit more thought before committing right up front. I completely stay away from doing anything like giving out any number during a call, because number one, I don't want to make the conversation about money. I want to make it about experience and value. Someone who leaves the call saying, I just want to work with you. It doesn't matter how much it costs. Like, I just want to work with you. That is the goal of the discovery call for me. And that's why money is always just sidelined. And also it allows me to get a really good picture of the commitment, of the scope before I give out any kind of number. And I always like to think about it. It's like, somebody sends you a nasty email and you are like so angry. And in that minute, you're just writing a reply. You know that you're angry and you're going to give out something that you may or may not like later. What do? As a rule, at least me, I never reply to an email the moment I see it, especially if it has an unpleasant tone to it or if it has something that agitates me. I just move back. I sleep over it. I don't even go there. So money is not getting me angry or agitated. But what I mean is that when there are these sensitive things, these big decision makers, we kind of want it time to brew. We want to give it thought and we want to operate from a very intentional place. So that's why I've constantly mentioned in this episode that I at least refrain from giving out any number, whether the client has a budget in mind or not. But let's say the client knows their budget and they share it with you. Let's say they say that, oh, yeah, we're thinking that this is about a $5,000 shoot. Wonderful. Okay. Now, you have already asked the client the style, the number of photos. You have a fair idea in your mind because you have been thinking as you've been speaking. You have a fair idea how much approximately you would have quoted and whether, even if you don't have the exact number, whether 5,000 falls in that ballpark or doesn't fall. You can listen to the number, you listen to the 5,000 and you gauge whether that number is for you, it works for you or it doesn't. If it's too far off, right from the beginning, it's just too low, man, then you can try and educate the client about the amount of time that it will take, the skill that it needs, and the amount of work that needs to actually go in to complete that job. And that's why probably the budget is a bit low. You can say something like, well, based on the work, the effort, the time, and the skill that is required for this project, you might want to consider a higher budget than $5,000. But please give me some time to come back to you with an exact quote of what it might be. Maybe please give me a day or two to come back to you. That's it. You just have to be this polite. You just have to give them an indication that 5,000, that way what it does is just that one or two lines, it actually gives them a heads up that, okay, looks like 5,000 doesn't work for them. And when you send out your quote, then they are not surprised. Okay. It's just like a little heads up. But again, you have not given out any number up front. But let's say the fee feels completely way off. So they're saying, oh, yeah, our budget is $3,000. But in your mind, you've already calculated that, okay, they want 20 photos and they want me to style them and they're going to use it on TV. It's like clearly over $10,000. And then they're like, oh, yeah, we are allocating $3,000 for it. It's like, it's way off. It's completely way off. It's 1/3, less than 1/3. And in those cases where I feel like the gap is just too much, I like to say it up front that the gap is just too much. This, in my mind, just off the top of my head, it's clearly over a $10,000 budget. And so do you think that's something that you would be willing to talk about? If they say, no, oh my God, no, we had not anticipated that, then that's it. You don't have to waste each other's time. You can just say that then in that case, my apologies, but to have me on the project and for me to do a good job, for me to bring my best, I think it would have easily been over a $10,000 fee. So thank you so much and blah, 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 blah. You can end it again at a very polite note, but also if you don't see that it can come anywhere close, a $5,000 project can really come close to a $6,000, $7,000 project. But the gap between a 3,000 and a 10,000 is pretty huge. So you have to apply your judgment in such cases. Again, there are points where you would never give out your fee in advance. You would never give it out in a call. But in these cases, at least I do, because I feel like there's no point going round and round about it. But there is another situation. Let's say that in your mind, you've calculated that, it's literally like I would easily quote $5,000 for it. And then the client comes back and they're like, when you ask them, what's your budget? They say, oh yeah, we've allocated like $8,000 for it. What do? Do not again butt in and say, oh, that's too high. It is not too high, boss. It only means that the value of those photos for the client is really high. And that's why the budget is higher. Maybe you had underestimated the value based on your past experience. So please just do your happy dance. And again, say that you will come back with the exact number and then quote around their $8,000 budget. Maybe you quote 8,500. Maybe you quote 7,800, but really use that number as a benchmark. Never quote less. Just saying. But I feel like this whole budget discussion, you can see that it can actually be a whole episode in itself because it's complex. It depends on so many things, right? Where you are based, who your client is, what your process is, what your rates are. I mean, it's so subjective, but really it is something that you need to incorporate in your process. Don't be hesitant to not ask for the budget. Don't say that, oh, no one ever tells me their budget. Have you asked? How many times have you asked? Okay. If you ask the budget, most of the times you'll get an answer, and most of the times you'll be on the winning side because you'll have greater clarity. So those were my top 3 questions to ask in a discovery call. There you go. Of course, I like to ask a lot about other things. My next layer of conversation is usually about venue. Where are we shooting? The timeline, whether it matches. What if I'm going on a holiday? What if, I have some other commitments? So timeline is important. Additional services, retouching, marketing, branding. All of this is my second layer of conversation. But if I only have 20 minutes to speak to a client, those 3 questions. Number 1, how many photos and what style of photos are you looking for? Second, what is the usage of these photos? Where will you be using them? And third, do you have a budget in mind? These are my top 3 questions. And even if I don't get to any other question, it gives me so much clarity that I can actually offer a quote that I feel confident about and that I can quote correctly. So blindly offering a standard rate card, I feel like it just makes us lose onto opportunity, just to get to know the client. That is such a deal breaker. And getting to know a client before jumping into a project is everything, because people work with people. Businesses work with people. They are working with you because they like you. They want to work with you. Money is usually a secondary. It's like a blind date. Coming back to Tinder, because it's so fun. It's like a blind date, except in a blind date, I mean, when you show up, you're like, oh, it's so awkward, and you can probably walk out because you don't have any commitment. But over here, you can't walk out, boss. Your professional reputation is on the line. So you need to do your homework before you go in and make any commitment, before you offer any quote. And also, I feel like if you offer your rate card blindly, you really lose onto the opportunity of getting paid fairly for a project. We don't want that. What if your quote is way lower than what their budget is? You really lose onto opportunities. So make sure to include a pre-discussion or a discovery call in your business workflow if you're already not doing it. And then make sure to include at least these 3 questions. I've learned them the hard way. I have gathered them. I've condensed them over the years, and they work brilliantly. And I'm pretty certain that they can be a game changer for you as well. I think it'll definitely give you an edge. It will make you look pro as well. And who doesn't want that? Right? And so if you enjoyed this episode, if you thought it was helpful, if you think like, yeah, man, this is going to be a real game changer, can I please request you to give us a 5-star rating on the app that you're listening on right now? It would really mean so much. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, could you write just a few lines of a review for us on why you like the podcast? It will really help me take the podcast further and make it bigger and better for you. If I could only ask for this small favor, please rate us where you're listening. And if you are on Apple, then could you write us a review as well? All right. With that, you know where to find me. If you have a question or a thought, please send me an email on hello@myfoodlens.com or DM me on Instagram at Dyutama_myfoodlens. I would love to know how you use these questions in your workflow and whether it makes a difference to your business and your professional persona. With that, I'll see you next week with another episode. Until then, bye-bye.